I'm going to show you how to fix an air fryer that won't power on anymore. So this is my air fryer, less than a year old. It stopped working. It's by Comfee. And usually when an item like an air fryer or a toaster oven or a hair dryer or a clothes dryer, when something like this happens to them, usually it's a safety mechanism inside the unit. The manufacturers, they don't want things getting too hot on the insides, so they'll put what's called a thermal fuse in it. And here's an example of one. And it behaves very similar to the electrical fuses you're probably familiar with in your car. But instead of being tripped by an excess of electrical current, this thing will trip when there's too much heat. So inside there, we've got an electrical connection held in place by a resin or a polymer, something that's designed to melt at a certain temperature. When that temperature is reached, the resin core will melt and liquefy, and then the electrical connection being held in place by it will break, and then your unit shuts off, and it doesn't work anymore, but at least you don't burn the house down. Now, in this instance, this is under warranty, and rather than repair it, they told me to just throw it away. They shipped me a brand new one. So instead of throwing it away, I'm going to fix this one, and then I'll have 2 air fryers. And wow, won't I be living in luxury then? Alright, in order to get to the innards of this machine, we got to take this outer shell off. So from the back of the unit, we're going to get all these screws around the perimeter. And then from the underside, there's a couple of more. Let's see if I can do this carefully. A few more on the other side, and we're going to go under these feet. There's some screws there, and then the whole thing just comes right off. Alright, so now that I've got the appliance open, I'm going to look around to see if I can see anything that looks obvious here. Maybe a connector that came undone, or a scorch mark on a motherboard, something that would indicate we have a break. I don't see anything, so I'm going to continue on with the thermal fuse theory. So coming in, the power comes in here. I'm going to follow the power leads. I've got some insulating fabric here covering something. There could be something under that. Following the power leads to the circuit board, I see right here on top of the firebox where it would get hot, where they would want to monitor. I see this insulating sleeve. Looks a little out of place. I'll bet the fuse is in here. So it's just being held down by this clip. I'm going to see if I can slide it out. And this should just slide this sleeve. And sure enough, it reveals our fuse. There's our fuse. And now we're going to troubleshoot the fuse. And now we're going to test this fuse to see if it's broken or not. There are a couple ways to test it. First, if you've got a multimeter here, you're going to set it to ohms, which is the resistance setting. What that means is it's testing to see if the electrical signal can get from one probe to the other. So if they're touching, you can see this goes down to 0, meaning there's 0 resistance there. And if you're testing both ends of a wire or a fuse, and it's a good fuse, it should do the same. If it's a bad fuse, it'll move towards the number 1, meaning there's infinite resistance. So I've got it touching both sides, and you can see it's reading 1. So this fuse is definitely shot. Another way to test, if you don't have a multimeter, you can get a piece of wire, and in this case I have one of these jumper wires with the alligator clips, but if you had any wire, you could wrap it around one side and wrap it around the other. That's going to bypass this fuse, and then you should be able to plug your unit in and it'll power up. I wouldn't suggest running it this way, but it'll show you if everything's working. So let's try that. And you can see it powers up when I bypass the fuse, so that does mean the fuse is the culprit here. And there's usually writing on these things, really hard to read a lot of times, or it's color-coded. It'll tell you what the specs are on the fuse so that you can know to replace it. I got a magnifying glass. This fuse is a 210 degrees Celsius fuse, so we're going to have to order something like that in order to replace it. Now I have these fuses sitting around. These are rated for 216 degrees, so they're close enough. They'll do the trick. And as far as how to connect it, These are crimped in here with it looks like a terminal fitting, and I have some terminal fittings. These are like the fittings that are made for a male and female end to go together. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to be able to undo where this is in now, so I'm going to clip and leave a little bit of the wire here, and I'm going to clip the remaining wire into one side of my terminal and my new fuse into the other, and I'm going to do that on both ends. It's going to be a little bit janky, but I've seen worse ways to connect them. I've seen people cut these and then wrap them around the new one, and they say that's good enough, so I'm sure mine will be even better. So now a little more detail on what I've done is I took one of these terminal connectors, I put a pliers on one end, a pliers on the other, and kind of wiggled back and forth until the base broke, and I was just left with those. And then using two pliers very carefully shoved one end of the fuse in there and the other end to the base of what was left on the old fuse. And you could see it looks like this. So here's where the old fuse is, here's the new one. And now I'm going to do the same thing over here, and then that should be it. Okay, I'm going to try to show you the process here. So you take your new fuse, put it in there, and you're going to need pliers to do this because otherwise you'll just bend the wire. So you just kind of push it in. It's a tight squeeze and that's good, but you could see it's in there. Kind of need to back it off a little. And if it's too loose, you just crimp it a little bit to make a tighter connection. And now I'm going to go back and do the same on the lead that's remaining, and that'll be our fix. Alright, here's everything connected back up. And after plugging in, everything works. And now we're going to just slide the insulation back over the whole thing and put it all back where it came from, wrap it up, and now we got a backup unit.